Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is your Wednesday night AEW Dynamite post show for July 30th, 2025. Of course, I am Kevin Zwicker of the Fast Count. Guys, this is going to be a very, very busy week for the channel. Obviously, we have SummerSlam weekend, which we are going to be covering as much as we possibly can. Got a review for WWE Unreal that should be dropping within the next couple of days. But we are now at this moment where we are discussing AEW Dynamite. Now, coming into this show, the focal point of what was being advertised and what people were going to be talking about coming into it was obviously the AEW World Championship match between Hangman Adam Page and Jon Moxley. What's going on, Pops? And going into this, personally, for me, I was thinking, after Texas Death, is it a bit overkill to have another match after that? Because in my mind, Texas Death is kind of final, right? You would think that there is nothing that they could really top that outside of having one of these guys literally decapitated in the middle of the ring. But going into this, we started off the show with the Outrunners going one-on-one with the Young Bucks. They are a part of this tag team championship tournament where they'll be going one-on-one with the Hurt Syndicate at Forbidden Door. Now, for me, logically speaking, with the momentum and the story that we're being told about the Young Bucks, how they are, downtrodden and going with this downward spiral after losing their EVP ship at All In. I was thinking that we are setting up for an Outrunners upset, especially with that report that came out, a couple of months ago about how prior to the Young Bucks losing their tag team championships to Private Party, the guys who they originally wanted to lose the titles to were the Outrunners. So with all these things kind of mixing in, I thought it was going to be the perfect storm for an Outrunners upset. But that is not what we got. We got the Young Bucks defeating the Outrunners, in which was a really good match, right? I think that when you talk about, the standard of what are the top matches tag team wise in AEW history, for me, the number one tag team match in AEW history is the Lucha Bros versus the Young Bucks inside a steel cage at All Out 2021. But the match that's right below it is probably that match when we first got the first couple of weeks of collision between the Bang Bang Gang and FTR. But this was a match that really much so put himself in a place where it's in the discussion for that, or it's at least somewhat in the ballpark of quality-wise, right? I think both dropped their dudes way too many times for my liking. Both got dropped too many times for my liking between Adam and John. That was a violent match, wasn't it? But the Outrunners, they put on a good showing. They're somebody who has been gaining, fan support for a while. Personally, for me, the Young Bucks are at that point when it comes to tag team wrestling where you can put them up against anybody and they're going to at least put on a somewhat quality of a match. And they were able to do that tonight. The Outrunners, a few weeks ago, they had a really good match with FTR on Collision. If you guys were able to catch that, that was some good stuff. But even though the Outrunners lost this match, they came out looking somewhat strong due to the fact that they went toe-to-toe with the Bucks. And after the match, we had Okada come out, and Okada was going to join in on this beating of the Outrunners, but he was saved by Swerve Strickland. We see Swerve come out. We see Okada be distracted by Swerve. The Outrunners were able to get back on their feet, take out the Young Bucks. Swerve and the Outrunners had a 3-on-1 beatdown of Okada. Eventually, Okada was able to be getting pulled to safety by the Bucks, but Swerve hit a Swerve stomp on all three of them, taking them out, creating another meme. If you saw Swerve Strickland's face, you seen that meme that has been breaking out from All In, where he made that face. We got another one tonight. 2 memes in about 3 weeks. That's a big accomplishment for Swerve Strickland, isn't it? I'm looking forward to when we eventually get that one-on-one match with Swerve and Okada. I know we got them one-on-one at Dynamite 250, but them going one-on-one this time for the Undisputed title should be a good showing, especially in Forbidden Door, right? Next, we get Mark Briscoe, a segment backstage where he's being interviewed and he's asked, about, MJF. Obviously, we have had this whole feud brewing between MJF and Swerve Strickland for the last several weeks. And you see, he's talking about MJF, but later on in the night, he's going in the main event against Ricochet, right? So you see Ricochet and the Gates of Agony interrupt him and tell him, you shouldn't be worried about MJF when we have this match tonight. He's like, after tonight, I am going to lay you out the exact same way that I laid you out at Revolution. If you guys remembered, they competed in that ambulance match where Ricochet was able to pick up the W and Mark Briscoe was this bloody mess. It was very hard to look at, right? And then you see Mark, he's talking about, ever since Revolution, I'm a new man, I'm this guy who's kind of in this zone, very animalistic ever since that match. He's like, and then you see Ricochet basically cut him off, and we're previewing for what's going to go down tonight. I don't know about you guys, but for me, Ricochet, I really think that we talk about all these times where the two major companies, AEW and WWE, fumbling certain individuals, right? We hear all these times that, AEW fumbled this person and WWE was able to make them into a star. And we've seen a couple of different instances, especially with Tony Storm and Ricochet, of people that WWE had and they were able to fumble. And it's just interesting to see how, when you talk about Ricochet, we all know about the athletic ability and what he brings into the ring. But I don't think anybody, even the most hardened Ricochet fans, pictured that the thing that we're going to be talking about the most when it comes to Ricochet at AEW is the character work that he has been providing so far. He is one of my favorite parts of Dynamite. Whether he's winning matches or losing matches, I think that the character work that he's done has been so strong that it kind of makes it a little bit irrelevant, right? Which is the perfect spot for him to be currently right now. Richard is bald. This is true. He is a man who is very follicle challenged, right? But to be honest with you, there's pictures of Ricochet back in the day when he had hair. I think he looks better bald. It's one of the rare cases that a man looks better bald. I think, Bruce Willis is in that category. The Rock is in that category. Steve Austin is in that category. They just have the head shapes to where they look better bald than they did with hair. Next, we get a segment with MJF. And this show was very MJF heavy. We saw him in 3 different segments throughout the night, but the first one I feel like was the strongest, right? MJF, he's standing outside of the Hurt Syndicate dressing room, and he knocks on the door, and he's not answered by MVP. He's answered by Shelton Benjamin, right? And you see Shelton Benjamin looking at MJF kind of, cross, giving him this cross look. And MJF says, I'm sorry about last week. I'm really sorry about Bobby's, actions and, all these, excuses that MJF comes up with. And he's looking for MVP. And Shelton tells him, MVP isn't here. And frankly, he's not here because he's sick of the actions that you have been pulling. And he asks MJF, what is the time, right? And MJF says, I don't know. He's like, I gave you my watch. And then you see Shelton pull out that watch from his pocket, and he says, this is a really nice watch, off of Temu. And he says, you don't think that I can recognize, a knockoff watch? And then he goes on to basically tell MJF, he says, after last week, he was like, we could have sat there and gave you a case of the beats. We could have laid you in a pool of your own piss, but we didn't because of MVP. So basically, he should be thanking MVP for sparing him. And he says, as far as you and the Hurt Syndicate, he puts his thumb down just like Bobby Lashley did. And he says, you're out. So MJF is a man that is on an island of his own at the moment. And what fancies me and what really interests me is what I think is what we're setting up for. Obviously, MJF, for the most part, has been a lone wolf when it comes to his time in AEW, but there was their brief time in the Pinnacle with Wardlow, Tully Blanchard, and FTR. And with no Wardlow, no Tully, that does leave FTR still in the, still a possibility, right? Especially with FTR being heels at the moment too. I think what we could possibly see is the Hurt Syndicate being costed the tag team championships at Forbidden Door by MJF, depending on how things turn out. If we're going to see a match between MJF and Hangman Page, that's a possibility in a realignment of MJF and FTR to set up this, basically this turf war between the Syndicate and this new version of the Pinnacle. Guys, if you haven't done it already, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe. It helps the channel out in more ways than you even know, and it's free. And remember, this is going to be a really loaded week like I started the stream to begin with. It's SummerSlam this weekend, so there's going to be a lot of coverage there. Not sure if we're going to go live following this show because Sunday is my mother's birthday. Saturday, I got something personal going on, a little TA. But there's going to be coverage wall to wall regardless, whether it's a post show or subsequent videos or shorts covering the event. Next, we get into the return of Christian Cage. This is the first time we've seen Christian Cage since All In, where he had his sons, the patriarchy, turn their back on him, those godforsaken bastards, right? So you need hair, you got a funny looking dome. I know I wear hats. But fortunately for me, I have a beautiful set of hair. A beautiful thick set of hair. Don't let the hat fool you. But you have Tony Schiavone introduced Christian Cage. And Christian Cage, he comes out and he says, I am Christian Cage and I'm an asshole, right? Duh, right? Headline, water is wet. This is, I'm an asshole and I'm the type that, hurt, basically. And he goes on to talk about how, at Revolution, the plan was set in motion. If you guys remember, he cashed in his contract. He made it a triple threat in the main event with Copeland and Jon Moxley, and he was choked out by Jon Moxley, and he ended up basically wasting the contract, right? This is, at that moment when I made it a triple threat, I looked down at Cope. He's like, and I basically became an asshole with feelings because I looked at my past at that moment, and I wasted my opportunity to become the AEW World Champion. That was something that he was obsessed with. It was basically the main reason why the patriarchy was even started. And then he goes on to talk about the turn at All In. He says, quite frankly, man, I'm kind of happy at the same time, because finally, you had Kip Sabian and Nick Wayne finally, grow a set to, basically, stand up to him, right? And then he goes on to talk about Mother Wayne. And the line of the night is when he starts talking about how, he's been in some deep holes, in his career, but none deeper and gaping than the hole he was with Mother Wayne before, right? And that instant good comment there. I butchered it, but it sounds better when it comes out of Christian's mouth. But you get the picture, right? And then he says, Nick, you're more talented than me. He said, you truly are the prodigy. He says, but since you sat here and become, a champion, you kind of basically think you're hot shit. He's like, I have spent more money on rental cars than you and Kip Sabian have made combined in your career. And then he goes on to say how, Nick Wayne in his young life, he's already has a father who's dead, and now he has another father that is dead to him. And he challenges Nick Wayne to a match eventually down the line. You see Christian going up the ramp. Mother Wayne stops him, and she's going to slap him for what he said about her. But it was basically a decoy, and you had Kip Sabian and Nick Wayne jump Christian Cage, and they hit him with probably one of the worst concertos I've seen in my life. But they gave Christian Cage a beating for being an old man. Poor guy. This is obviously leading up to the eventual, pairing of him and Adam Copeland again. We know that this one's going to go down. And for me, when we saw the moment that Copeland signed, you knew that eventually we were going to get there, right? I think it's kind of a shame that things didn't work out with the Hardys in AEW, because obviously if they were around, I'm sure we probably would have gotten another match between Edge and Christian against them. If you guys don't know, a couple of weeks ago at Slammiversary for TNA, it is announced that at Bound for Glory, we're going to see Team 3D go against the Hardys again. It kind of feels like there's something missing because, with all this, red tape going between the companies and stuff, we're not going to be able to see Christian Edge involved in that, which is going to be kind of a bummer because that in a dream scenario that would be the match we're getting, but hey, shit happens, right? Next, we get a backstage segment with FTR. Stokely is talking about how Cope is banned from the building, and he hopes to ban him from Collision tomorrow. And then he says that, if FTR was 100%, they would have beat up the Hurt Syndicate last week. And before they could really get things rolling, the Bucks come into the office, the dressing room that they are in. And you see Dax Harwood basically tell the Bucks, because obviously there are two teams that have a vast history against each other. He says, we're happy to see, the Bucks getting their groove back and how they hope to see the Bucks in the finals. And then they leave out the room. The Bucks are still in the room with Stokely. And Stokely says, you guys aren't the bosses anymore, right? And the Bucks say, yeah, we're not. And you see Stoke basically try to lunge at them to intimidate them. Didn't work because nobody's ever intimidated by Big Stokes. Guys, please remember to hit the like button and subscribe. It helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. And like I started off the stream in the begin with, be on the lookout within the next couple of days for the WWE Unreal review. That's getting a lot of people talking, right? There's also a video that I'm probably going to drop tomorrow about this interview that Cody Rhodes had with Bill Simmons. There was an interesting little tidbit that came out of it that really sparked my interest that I think you guys would find interesting to talk about. Bill Simmons, a real mass hole. They need to find a third independent company. TNA and AEW work with everyone. What's funny about that? I honestly think that TNA's relationship with New Japan and their partnership prior with TNA and their partnership now with CMLL, I think the fact that they were doing that, I think it really sparks WWE's, or really kind of opened up their mind to do these other partnerships. I don't think if AEW was around, there would be any type of partnership between WWE and TNA or WWE's acquiring AAA. I think that's one of the benefits of AEW, the fact that it now has kind of expanded WWE's mind into working with companies that they priorly wouldn't have done before, right? Because we all know under Vince McMahon, that was a no-go, right? Like, we don't play with others. And I don't think Triple H probably would have done the same thing either if there was no AEW. But who knows, right? Next, we're getting into the world title match between Jon Moxley and Hangman Adam Page. What's interesting to me is the fact that this match didn't take place in the main event. So when I saw that this match wasn't taking place in the main event, I automatically assumed it was going to be kind of similar to when we saw CM Punk go up against Jon Moxley on that episode of Dynamite for the world title prior to All Out, where we got an angle and not an actual match. I was thinking we're either going to get an angle or this is going to be closer to a 30-minute match. And it was the latter, right? But obviously, they made the stipulation last week where there was going to be no interference. So for me, this was kind of the finale of this rivalry between Hangman and Adam Page. Like I started off the stream before, I kind of feel as if Texas Death is pretty final. But hey, what do I know, right? But this was a match they started off blow for blow, right? Chopping each other. Basically, this test the strength between these two guys. Obviously, the story that they have been telling is, Mox not thinking that Hangman is a guy who's basically strong enough to where he can take on the responsibility of being the champion. Basically, if he's a guy who is afraid of the grind, right? Because as we all know, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with being the champion. Having to constantly, especially if you're a fighting champion, having to constantly wrestle on a weekly basis, having somebody constantly gunning for you. all these different pressures of being the AEW champion, which Mox repeated many times heading into their match at All In, that he doesn't feel as if Hangman was going to be able to handle all these different pressures that come with it, right? But the match we had was security draping around the ring, so there was no interference that was going to be involved in this. Mox and Hangman, they went blow for blow. They had different callbacks from their different matches. Obviously, the most famous spots between these two guys and all the matches that they had was the choke spots. We've seen Hangman choke out Moxley twice with the chain at All In and at Revolution a few years back. We got a little bit of callback to that. We saw Jon Moxley really put, Hangman through the ringer for the most part. They were brawling on the outside. There was a spot where they were on the announcer table where it looks as if Jon Moxley was going to hit, the pendulum on it, but Hangman was able to reverse it. Hangman, he actually cut himself on his head. You couldn't tell that much because Hangman has a lot of hair. But you can see it if you look closely. It got to a point where the referee was down, right? And as soon as the referee was down, you knew that there was going to be a lot of shenanigans. We saw a tease of Wheeler Yuta and Claudio basically walking towards the ring, which was a decoy to distract and have Marina Shafir come in, give Mox the belt, hit Hangman with the belt shot. We looked as if it was going to be over for Hangman. Hangman was able to kick out. But the way that this match ended was basically, this was the nail in a coffin for Jon Moxley and Hangman Page. We also got an appearance from Darby Allin, which obviously is kind of setting up a match between Darby Allin and Jon Moxley again. Darby Allin has been doing his best Sting impression since he's returned. We haven't gotten an in-ring promo by Darby. We've only seen Darby Allin on the rafters, basically, in this the balcony setup, this arena. He hasn't said a single word ever since he's returned, and they show that video package of him on Mount Everest. But we see Jon Moxley get hit with a buckshot. Then he gets hit with a deadeye. 1, 2, 3. Hangman Page retained the championship, which is good, right? It wouldn't have made a lot of sense at all if we would have saw this whole story being told of Hangman, doing this redemption arc to win the title, just for him to lose the title back to the guy that he just won it off of, right? Would have made zero sense. Guys, please remember to hit the like button if you haven't. It helps the channel out in more ways than you guys even know. If 6 of them really wanted it, it would have happened. I don't know. Because you would think that would have happened with the Dudleys and Christian Cage and Jeff and Matt. They probably, the only way that I could have seen that happening, them actually all 3 teams having being in the matches, if it was like on an independent show, because with all this different red tape between TNA and WWE and AEW, it just, I don't know, man. Next, we get into the tag team match between Billy Starkz and Athena and Toni Storm and Alex Windsor. Obviously, we're having this whole story being told between Toni Storm and Athena, the top dog in Ring of Honor and the top dog in AEW. 2 women who have really been busting their ass for the last year and a half and been doing a lot of good work. If you haven't seen the things that Athena has been doing in Ring of Honor, check it out. She is our forever champion. We started off this match with Alex Windsor and Athena. Eventually, Athena was taunting, hot dogging it a little bit. Alex Windsor tagged in Toni Storm. We got a little bit of a tease of us eventually getting Toni Storm and Athena wrestling, but we got a quick tag to Billy Starkz. Didn't really get to see that. But the thing that people are going to come out of this match, and for me, this basically signifies that when they do have a match, Toni is going to win, is that we saw Athena pick up a pin on Toni. That is the kiss of death, in my opinion. Anytime, just think about any feud in wrestling, at least for the last decade, where you see the challenger pick up the pin on the champion to the build to their match. It has to be like a 90% of the time occurrence that the champion, when they get pinned, they win the match, right? I can't wait for the whole match either. Athena and Toni can go, and not only can they go, with their in-ring work, obviously the character work. So it's going to be a phenomenal match. I'm looking forward to it, right? I don't know if you guys have noticed, but ever since, Mariah May left and she went to NXT, especially with that promo that she cut on Thursday, oof, stinky. People on the streets are talking, said that Toni was the one who carried her during that feud. I don't know. Maybe. I think Mariah May, Blake Monroe is a very talented individual, especially dating back to her work at Stardom. But I don't know what's been going on in NXT in the way that Shawn Michaels has been booking her. Maybe there might be some credence to Toni carried her during that feud, because going into that feud was so good, and just coming off of that and seeing what she's doing in NXT right now, it's a bit jarring. Still very early. Who knows? There was times where Tiffany Stratton early on in her NXT run where it looked as if she probably wasn't going to make it, and now look at her right now. She's the women's champion. So who knows? Very early, but it's not looking good for her at the moment, right? Guys, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. Like I said, you got WWE Unreal review coming. You got SummerSlam coverage coming both nights. So you're going to miss out if you don't hit the sub button. It's going to be some good stuff. Come by, hang out. I heard those shows are going to be like that. SummerSlam weekend is going to be 12 hours combined, which is daunting if you think about it, especially with the fact that there's not a lot of matches. So imagine that. There might, between the two nights, I think it's maybe 10, 12 matches at most. So it sounds as if they're going to be stretching a lot of those matches, and I hope it's not the Jelly Roll one. Not looking forward to that bullshit. Anyways, so we're seeing Hangman getting interviewed by Renee backstage. She's asking him how does he feel after his championship match where he was successfully able to retain. And MJF comes out and he congratulates him, and they're recapping their build to Revolution and how Hangman doesn't want to give MJF a world title shot unless he uses his contract. And you see MJF calling him out and says, man, I miss the days where we had fighting champions. I miss the days where we had champions like Swerve Strickland. Obviously trying to goat Hangman into giving him a world title shot. And see Hangman and says, you're thinking you're going to be able to goat me into giving you a title shot without using that contract by invoking the name of Swerve. He says, no, you're going to have to earn it. There's a line of guys knocking down my door that are more deserving of getting a world title shot. A guy like Mark Briscoe. So if you want to get a world title shot, you're going to have to earn it, and you're going to have to beat Mark Briscoe. Now, for me, I thought that didn't make any logical sense, because if you've been paying attention, Mark Briscoe is coming off of two big, time losses, right? Obviously, he's been able to get some wins on the in-between time, but most notably his loss to Ricochet. That's a high-profile loss. Not being able to get the job done at All In the Gauntlet match, that's another high-profile loss. So you have Mark Briscoe, which, as somebody who these are on two big stages, that's my lasting memory, right? But Mark Briscoe has been able to pick up these wins on Collision and pick up these wins on Dynamite to where there's a little bit of momentum. But for me, I don't know. Maybe that's just me thinking too much, right? Or me thinking too hard. She can wrestle, but NXT isn't doing her any promo skills any favor. Need new writers. Stevie Richards, he talks about this a lot. And other wrestlers talk about this a lot when they do their podcasts, where they discuss, the dreaded, creative has nothing for you. And for me, and he brings up a very valid point. He says, well, if creative has nothing for me, then you should hire new writers, not get rid of the wrestler. Because obviously the wrestlers, I say obviously a lot, and that's something I just noticed. But the wrestlers are there for a reason, right? They were hired based off of the skill that they can do. And if creative has nothing for them, I feel like there's more of an indictment on them not being able to create interesting ideas than it is the wrestler not being good, because they were hired for a reason, right? That's just my 2 cents. Next, we get into the main event. Ricochet, Mark Briscoe. This is Ricochet and Mark Briscoe going at it again. They went and they had their ambulance match at Revolution. Mark came in this match. He started off hot. Now with Ricochet having his two goons with him, the GOA, you knew that they were going to get involved, and they got involved almost immediately. They stood on the ring aprons to distract Mark Briscoe, so Ricochet was able to take advantage of that. You got them interviewing in multiple different spots. It got to the point where you had Brodito, Brody King, and Bandito, who are going to be wrestling GOA tomorrow on Collision. Remember, Collision is on Thursday this week, not Saturday, because of SummerSlam. They should keep Collision permanently on Thursday, in my opinion. Easier watch, and for me, Saturday, got some things to do some of the time, so I would prefer a Thursday so I can catch Collision on a more consistent basis. But Brodito was able to even the odds. It was gotten to the point where Mark Briscoe was able to hit the J Driller to pin Ricochet for the win. After the match, you had Mark Briscoe call out MJF, and one of the coldest lines in more recent memories in wrestling was basically what he said, and I'm paraphrasing it, was, he's talking about his brother, talking about how his brother's in the mansion in the sky. And he says, he's afraid that he's not going to ever see his brother again because he is going to murder MJF. And he calls out MJF. We hear MJF's music hits. We get no MJF. MJF appears on the screen. And he says, Mark, he's like, you really thought I was going to come out of there and we're going to do this face to face? He says, I don't really respect you, and I like the fact that you've dropped this comedy act and you're being more serious. But due to the fact that Hangman Page is going to make me jump through hoops, I accept this match next week in the main event. Mark Briscoe, MJF again, and then we see MJF say, "If you can make it." We have MJF hit Mark Briscoe with a low blow. He starts hitting him in the head with repeated blows. He said, "Is this what you wanted, Hangman?" He's like, if this was Hangman doing this, everybody would be eating it up, because as we know, Hangman Page is the main character, and MJF is obviously extremely jealous and insecure of this. And then we see Hangman come out to make the save. Next week, Mark Briscoe, MJF in the main event. Looking forward to it. It was a very solid episode of Dynamite, especially when it comes to the in-ring work stuff. You had some storylines progress. I thought out of the two shows, Raw and Dynamite, I think Dynamite was a stronger show this week. I think that WWE has a lot of momentum heading into SummerSlam, and obviously, I got to stop saying that word. And Dynamite and AEW, they're building towards Forbidden Door. But just this week, I think Dynamite was a little bit better, just based off of the in-ring work. But WWE and Raw was really solid this week too. But guys, like I said, if you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button, because the WWE Unreal review is coming in within the next couple of days. SummerSlam is going to be jam-packed coverage. Not 100% sure if we're going to do post shows for both nights, because like I said, Sunday is my mother's birthday, and I can't sit there and miss out on that. So depending on what arrangements are going to go down for that at a certain times, we can do that. And Saturday, I got a personal thing going on as well. So, but there will be coverage, whether it's individual videos or shorts. You're going to get material from there. You're going to get the WWE Unreal review, and you're also going to get some stuff in between there as well. Let me do a little plug. My boy, my partner in content, Robin Lumberg, him and his sons have started up a new wrestling channel. It is called Wrestle Rascals, I believe. It's going to be basically, little bit not what I do. It's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be more so, like fantasy booking, reactions to certain things, video gameplay of the 2K, the WWE 2K stuff. So it's going to be a lot of different options that they're going to get and give you guys there. But guys, this was your Dynamite post show for July 30th. Please remember, before we hit out the door, hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. Night, good night. Salty Grampy. Guys, I am Kevin Zwicker. I'm out.